Hey guys, this video is going to be a more personal video as I'll be talking about some of my favorite renditions of certain physiques in the history of bodybuilding. I'm sure some of you will know almost all, if not all, of the competitors on the list. However, I'm sure that some of the versions you will see may be new or underrated for you guys. Unlike some of the other lists I've made in the past, or other lists of other YouTubers, I won't be talking about a competitor in their entirety, as I prefer to look at specific versions of these guys, as nobody is always perfect. Now, before we do dive into it, I want to give a quick shout out to my partner, Old School Labs. If you guys are interested in high quality supplements, you can use my code JakeUltimate or check out the link in the description below. With that all being said, if you guys enjoyed these videos, a like and sub would be awesome, as it helps out the channel more than you think. And without any further ado, let's get into this video. Alright, let's start off with one of bodybuilding's most underrated competitors, and that's Chris Cormier, and more specifically his remarkable performance at the 1999 Mr. Olympia. Chris was a bodybuilder who really thrived on balance. Unlike some of his contemporaries, he didn't have the dominant features of a Ronnie Coleman or Flex Wheeler, in the sense that he didn't really have a standout attribute. However, he did not possess any glaring weaknesses. His physique was truly the embodiment of proportion, symmetry, and harmony. Now, 1999, that was really the year where everything came together for him. Chris finished third at the Olympia, which was the culmination of years of hard work and refinement. The stage lighting that year was particularly favorable, and it made every competitor look better, and for Chris, it definitely worked wonders. The lighting highlighted his perfectly sculpted physique, showcasing his muscular separation, size, and aesthetics perfectly. His proportions were spot on, especially comparing his upper and lower bodies. Both were very well developed but never too overpowering. Additionally, from behind, you could see just how complete his physique was. Thick, dense muscles that showcased the hard work and incredible completeness he brought. Despite not having the extreme mass of some of his other competitors, Chris's refinement and symmetry definitely set him apart. His legs were balanced with his upper body, as I mentioned earlier, and his waistline was tight, keeping his silhouette clean and very sharp. 1999 definitely represented the peak of his career, at least in my opinion, a perfect combination of condition, proportion, and presentation. His overall stage presence was also magnetic, as he looked confident and calm, and his posing routine was elegant and humorous at times. The third place finish was definitely well deserved, but what's often overlooked is just how close he came to securing second. For anyone who appreciates the art of bodybuilding and the importance of symmetry, Chris Cormier's 1999 Olympia physique is certainly one that is essential to examine. He could have easily beaten the far less conditioned and complete Flex Wheeler, who took second place, and this rendition of Chris remains as an all-time favorite of mine. Now let's take a look at one of the most refined physiques in bodybuilding history, that being Shawn Ray, specifically his 1992 Mr. Olympia look, which for me is one of Shawn's best and perfectly showcases why he's regarded as one of the most aesthetically gifted bodybuilders of all time. In 1992, Shawn delivered a masterclass in symmetry, proportion, condition, as well as in muscularity. His physique was a textbook example of balance, and he truly embodied what classic bodybuilding is all about. While Shawn might not have been the biggest or most dominant competitor on stage, there was something undeniably perfect about his presentation. His musculature was full and dense, but never overbearing. Each body part had the ideal amount of size in relation to the rest of his frame. The balance between his upper and lower body was flawless, and his waist was narrow, which gave him that ideal V-taper shape. Shawn's condition was also immaculate. I mean, there's no other way to put it. It was amazing, as he was shredded without looking too dry or gaunt, a feat that is often difficult to pull off when maintaining such an aesthetically pleasing shape and fullness. His posing routine in 1992 was also something to behold. He moved with grace and elegance, hitting angles that accentuated his lines and proportions in the most flattering of ways. It's hard to imagine another bodybuilder who could pull off such fluid posing while maintaining that level of composure. Ultimately, in my opinion, Shawn's physique in 1992 is one of my personal favorites because it shows you that you don't have to be the biggest guy to be the most impressive. It's the ultimate example of mass with class, and it perfectly encapsulates what bodybuilding should strive for: symmetry, proportion, and condition, all in harmony. While Shawn would continue to improve and add more and more mass, his younger, fresher version is the one that truly stands out to me. Next up, we have Jay Cutler, a true legend of bodybuilding. Now, Jay might just be my favorite bodybuilder of all time, not only because of his incredible physique, but also because of his relentless competitive spirit and his never give up attitude. One of the moments where we saw Jay's true potential was definitely at that 2000 Night of Champions, where he delivered one of his best ever, almost criminally underrated performances. This was a huge turning point in Jay's career. It was the first major show where he truly showed the world what he was capable of. From the very first moment he stepped out on that stage, it was very clear that Jay had a physique that was going to turn heads. His condition was sharp, especially from behind, where his glutes and hamstrings were dialed in, and his back was full and complete. His lower lats were also fully inserted, unlike in later years, giving him that much desired V-taper and a very complete look in the back. But the true beauty of this version of Jay was in his balance. His upper body and lower bodies matched perfectly. His arms were massive yet symmetrical, his waistline was in check and tight, and his quads were as big and as full and as ripped as ever. This version of Jay in his pre-Olympia winning years was fresh and youthful, with no injuries or muscle imbalances that would hold him back. It's this uninjured, full look that makes this version of Jay so unique to me. While he wasn't at the peak size that he would later reach, this was a version of Jay that still had that youthful roundness and fullness to his muscle bellies that was very distinctive, and the lack of injuries only furthered this, you could say, youthful look. He went on to win this Night of Champions, of course, which really set the stage for the rest of his career. Later that year, he would place 8th at the Mr. Olympia, but despite the low placing, it was clear that Jay was coming into his own. The 2000 Night of Champions is definitely a turning point for Jay, and it's a version of Jay Cutler that will always be a favorite of mine. It's the perfect balance of youth, condition, and muscle mass that makes this perfect physique stand out to me, and I also do like Jay's physiques when he was more of an underdog. That's just a personal thing for me. Next, we turn to Flex Wheeler, widely considered one of bodybuilding's most aesthetically perfect athletes. His 1993 Ironman Pro appearance is, in my opinion, one of his best looks ever, and for good reason. From the videos and pictures that I've seen, Flex looked absolutely incredible. I mean, he was bursting full, with every muscle popping in the most defined way possible. The lighting at the show also was exceptional, casting the perfect glow and shadow that highlighted all of Flex's best attributes. If you've ever seen Flex at his peak, you know exactly what I mean when I say he looked like a superhero come to life. His muscle bellies were round and full, but not, overly inflated, if you guys catch my drift, and everything looked balanced and very much in place. Flex was known for his near-perfect symmetry and proportion, and in 1993 he really embodied this sentiment. His physique was incredibly uniform, combining his signature round bubbly muscle bellies with top-notch condition that made him stand out from the pack. From his chest and shoulders to his quads and even the calves, every muscle had the perfect amount of fullness without being too much for his frame. Additionally, what truly made this version of Flex stand out to me was his ability to blend this roundness with a level of condition that was not seen later on in his career. His abs were razor sharp, his legs from all angles were shredded to the bone, and his arms looked full and defined from every angle. There was nothing out of place, and his condition was spot on in all the right areas. To me, this was Flex at his best. He was in perfect shape yet still carried a certain fullness and roundness that made his physique look dynamic and almost striking. The lighting, his peak condition, and the stage presence all came together to create one of the most underrated and very special looks in bodybuilding history. It's definitely an underrated version of Flex, no doubt, but also one of his best and certainly one of my personal favorites. 1993 was his best year for uniform condition, and if you're a fan of bodybuilding aesthetics, this is definitely a must-see version of Flex Wheeler. Moving on, let's talk about one of bodybuilding's most iconic competitors, Kevin Levrone, and more specifically his appearance at the 1997 Finnish Grand Prix. Kevin was known for having one of the most aesthetically pleasing and desirable physiques in bodybuilding history, and 1997 was one of his absolute best years. At this show, Kevin looked like a true mass monster, but also was incredibly shredded and very aesthetic. He was massive, almost unrealistically big, but he still maintained his signature symmetry and proportionality, which set him apart from the others that had similar size. This was Kevin Levrone in his prime, and he was really on fire. His muscle maturity, muscularity, conditioning, all of these aspects were jaw-dropping, and he was one of the few competitors who could combine such size with the kind of tight shredded detail that made him stand out from the rest. From his chest to the quads, every muscle was full round and displayed in perfect proportion, encapsulating the term he was known for, being absolutely full blown. He had a dominant presence on that stage, almost as if he knew he was going to take the win. His posing routine was also one of his best, at least in my opinion. He moved with such grace and confidence that you could feel the energy radiating from the stage, as well as just from watching the video. The whole package came together flawlessly, and Kevin looked unstoppable. For me, what makes this version of Kevin so special is the way that he looked like he was truly trying to be the best. There was no denying his desire to dominate here, and his physique was the perfect reflection of that. 1997 was a standout year for Kevin, and it's one of my personal favorites in terms of this version, as he showcased the best of his abilities in true spectacular fashion. This version of Kevin really epitomizes what peak bodybuilding in the 90s was all about: size, shape, symmetry, and fantastic posing, all in one incredible physique. Now let's talk about Lee Haney, and more specifically his 1991 Olympia victory. As time has gone on and I've learned more and more about bodybuilding, Lee's physique and personality have become increasingly more important to me. In the past, it was easy to look past him, as he never really had any stiff competition during his reign. I mean, he was just too dominant to where it almost made his winning years seem uninteresting in comparison to the likes of Ronnie, Jay, or Dorian. That said, I've definitely learned more about the sport over time, and now I consider him to be an all-time favorite, with his 91 physique being the pinnacle of his career, at least in my opinion. His 1991 physique is widely regarded as one of the best in the bodybuilding history, though, and for good reason. He was coming into that Olympia, after 7 consecutive years of dominance, and in 91 he truly showcased that he had the total bodybuilding package. Lee's physique in 91 was truly balanced. There was not a single ounce of extra weight anywhere on that physique, and his proportions were just perfect. His waistline was relatively narrow, his signature vacuum in the front double gave him that classic V taper, and his lats flared out wide to both sides, creating a silhouette that was both wide and very symmetrical. Lee had big, full, round muscle bellies, but they were all in unison. His arms were at their best and didn't overpower the rest of his body. His quads were thick, his chest was full and striated, and his back was dense with muscle. Everything was in place and everything was tight. Haney wasn't just big for the sake of being big, just like his training mantra where you don't train to annihilate, you train to stimulate. And he also had all that condition to match. And it was this combination of size and definition that made him stand out from the rest of the competition. Perhaps the most impressive aspect of his physique, though, was his overall flow. His body had an aesthetic quality that is very hard to describe, and moreover very hard to beat. It was muscular but not overly bulky, and it looked almost effortless. In 1991, Lee not only had the mass, but also that detail and condition I was talking about that made his physique really truly something special, which he needed to contend with some of the fierce competitors. What's even more remarkable is that this was the year where Lee faced off against a very strong up-and-coming competitor who we all know as Dorian Yates. Dorian was bringing a new level of mass and condition, but Lee's experience and ability to bring a perfectly balanced package kept him ahead. Ultimately, Lee Haney's 1991 Olympia physique is a perfect example of what classic bodybuilding should be, just like Shawn Ray in a sense, and is the reason why he's on this list. He's by far the most dominant bodybuilder of the golden era, arguably the most dominant bodybuilder of all time, had one of the most refined and complete physiques, and had a training mentality and personality that were both humble and driven. These are all reasons why I really do like Lee Haney as a bodybuilder and as a person, and that's the reason that the 1991 Mr. Olympia version of him is on this list. Finally, we're wrapping up this video with the man who needs no introduction, and that would be none other than the king, Ronnie Coleman. Now, I chose Ronnie's 2004 British Grand Prix performance to be in this video, and it's one of the most underrated and overlooked versions of his career, but it's undoubtedly one of his best. At this show, Ronnie was in peak shape like always. He was shredded to the bone, with muscles carved out of marble basically. His trademark size was obviously there, but he was much sharper and tighter than he had been at the 2004 Mr. Olympia, where some critics had noted that his waistline had gotten a bit wider due to his massive size. I mean, he was at his biggest at that '04 Olympia of all time, so there's no doubt that his waist would have gotten a bit bigger and fuller. Now, at this British Grand Prix, Ronnie kept his waistline under control, and it made a huge difference in my opinion. His physique was incredibly dense with each muscle group well defined and separated, and his conditioning was dialed in perfectly, and it allowed his massive frame to show off all the detail. The only word to describe Ronnie in 2004 at this show is dominant. He destroyed the competition, to put it bluntly. There really was no contest. His arms, legs, and back were as thick as ever, but the conditioning made him look like a completely different athlete compared to his Mr. Olympia appearance that year. Now, don't get me wrong, his '04 Olympia appearance was good, and is arguably one of his best as well, but that gut and the, protrusion he had, the distension, it really kind of marred his flow. Now, what I love the most about this version of Ronnie is the way that his physique maintained that massive, freakish look without losing the sharpness and tightness that made him such a force in bodybuilding. He looked like a true monster in the best way possible. Ending the video with Ronnie's performance at the 2004 British Grand Prix is the perfect way to honor one of the greatest bodybuilders of all time, and it's a version that doesn't get nearly the recognition it deserves. It stands out to me because he had all that size of the peak years, yet brought a tighter waistline, impeccable condition, and zero signs of slowing down. Anyways, that's about it for the video. Please let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. With that all being said, I'll see you all in the next one. Thanks for watching.